APSC Masterclass, and today's topic is in AI and ML. So we'll go through the standard housekeeping. So for everyone in the room, in the case of an emergency, we'll be evacuating through the door that you can see through the glass wall over there, comes out onto Northbourne Avenue, and we'll turn left onto Alinga Street and assemble around the corner until we are advised that we can come back to the office. If you need the bathrooms, they're just behind the elevator shaft there. The men's is the first one and women's is a little bit further on. If you are at home, I recommend that you try to minimise any of the distractions around you. So I encourage you to turn your phones to silent. Actually, everyone in the room, if you can turn your phones to silent, that would be great too. And just avoid any distractions, but noting that, you know, life is life and sometimes distractions are inevitable. But it'd be great to keep your attention all the day. For those who are on, you can see on the slide here, if you're on an iPhone or an iPad, just note that you won't be able to see both the questions and the presentation screens at the same time. So that's all fine. We'll have Q&A sessions after the presentations. So for those who are online, please feel free to put your questions into the chat and we'll come to those. And of course, I'll do my daily exercise here in the room, running around with the microphone. So before we go any further, though, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting today for the Ngunnawal people. I wish to acknowledge and recognise the connection that our First Nations people have to this land, and also wish to acknowledge that they are our first scientists, engineers, inventors and entrepreneurs. So what we can learn from our First Nations people is really rich and will continue to influence our culture and our technology developments even going forward. So I wish to extend this acknowledgement and recognition and respect to any elders past, present, and those who are in the room today. So today we have a bit of a treat in that we have a double act to start with, but we're still in the same format of having two sessions in the day. So to start off with, we have Jim and Anthony coming to us today to talk about Beyond the Hype. So just a bit of background, Jim McLeod is a data and AI technical specialist with Microsoft in Canberra. He has worked with databases for over 20 years, from SQL Server 2000 onwards, and worn almost every he's worn almost every data-related hat at some point during that time. Although database administration and performance holds a special spot in his heart. Not quite what I would be saying is holding a special space in my heart, but that's okay. In 2015, Jim added Power BI to his stack of preferred technologies and enjoys the many hours he spends a week at Microsoft talking about the platform. So Jim is going to be supported by Anthony Draven, who is a senior manager and solution architect with Accenture. He leads the security solution area within Australia and New Zealand and for the Microsoft Business Group. Anthony is an experienced consultant to government and has delivered organisation-wide transformations across many government agencies. As an enterprise architect, Anthony works directly with clients and Microsoft, ensuring that new solutions integrate into the existing application landscape to deliver practical value. Anthony has also worked in the cross-section of Australian government agencies in health, science and innovation, agriculture, central agencies and the environment. So some massive brains here about to come up, and hopefully you'll get a huge amount out of this and lots of questions for the end. So Jim and Anthony, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak here. And yeah, welcome. What we wanted to do in this presentation was there's a huge amount of hype at the moment around AI and ML. And that means, what do we practically need to do with it? You know, how do we get beyond the hype? How do the everyday person who's in an organisation use this practically. And that's what we're going to go through today. There's a bit of background. We don't want to just dive into the demonstration without giving you a bit of an overview. I know we've got a cross-section of experience in the room.
Did you not have the clicker?
I don't have a clicker.
There's a clicker.
Ah, look at that. Okay, so what we're going to have a look at today is what is AI and ML. I'm just going to give a bit of an overview about the traditional approaches. We are going to talk about generative AI as well. Can't ignore the latest and greatest in this space. We're also going to look at the security and ethics around this. Ethics and security. I know that almost in every course we talk about ethics and it's a bit dry, but it's really important in this space. Then we're going to talk about personal productivity. And then we're going to go on to a demonstration as well. For some reason. Okay. So first of all, what is AI and what is machine learning? Now I'm interested, how much experience do we have with this in the room and online? Can you put your hands up whether you've got some experience with this? Yeah, bit of experience. Actually, a lot of experience here in the room, which is great. Okay, so AI, bit of a definition around it. It's about using maths and logic to basically try and simulate a human. And machine learning, that's related to this. It's really a subset of it, and it's focused more on the analysis and the data side of it. So the analysis and the data goes hand in hand with the more general AI, which is more about humans in general. So let's look a bit at the timeline around this. And you probably all heard of the Turing test. That idea of being able to slip a piece of paper under the door, you know, and if a person can't tell whether it's a machine or a human, then we've got and pass the Turing test. And we see that in the idea of the reverse captcha, where we make sure that you can't pretend to be a human there. So that was around the 1950s, 1960s. It's interesting, we're going to have Imran speak a little bit later from IBM. IBM's very much has been a leader in this space. So we had Deep Blue taking on in chess later on in 1997. And then we get into that deep learning space. And now we're into the generative AI. So to keep an eye on the time. Okay, so there's three different models of it, three different paradigms. So we've got supervised learning, and that in general is where you pass data and you label it. So for example, you might have a bunch of fruit and you label it and you say, this is an orange, this is an apple. We're going to extrapolate conclusions from that so that we can pass new lots of data to it and make extrapolations from that, labeling it. Then we have unsupervised learning. That's where we don't label it, we just pass it and we try and look at differentiations between it to draw conclusions. And finally, we have reinforced learning. So that's a bit more around the idea, by definition, we talk about an agent and we talk about an agent going off and trying to do things and learn. It's more about that unstructured approach. So as a great example, if we put a bot into Minecraft and we say, hey, there's the lava, there's the path, try and find your way to the end. And it's about reward, it's about punishment. So if they have a path and they have lava and the agent falls into the lava, they have to go and start again. So the idea is to learn to get to the end of the maze, avoid the lava. So what is a model? So all of machine learning has to do with a model. This is the idea that you take an input, do something, process, and get an output. So that same kind of approach, that systems thinking approach, same thing applied to machine learning. So in this case, what sort of model would we have to make extrapolations if we passed it data about a dog? What conclusions could we draw about what size boot, if we needed to put a snow boot onto a dog? So if we give them a harness, and a harness size 4, reasonable size dog, what kind of boot are we going to have, because it's a medium to a larger dog? Now the next part, when we talk about machine learning, we're doing the side of building it. We need to divide our sample data into the training data and the testing data. Because if we take all our data that we've got to start to build that model and test that model, and we put it all into the training data, then we can't test whether we've got, a model that's working. So this slide is oriented towards the new generative AI approaches, with that idea that everything's high cost, slow deployment, and each service has to be trained in its own specific way. But what's really important is to look at that classic AI approach. So the idea of being able to classify that data, we talked about the labeling before. We talked about that more open detection before as well, unlabeled data. Then we've got things like tracking an object. So video-based approaches, trying to make extrapolations about, what type have we got an object here? Is it a skier? Is it a snowboarder? What are those conclusions? How does the model help us draw those conclusions? I want to really draw your attention to the entities model there. Really important for the bot that we're going to see later on through this. So an entity is something that's particularly important to a subject in which we're talking about. It may be important within the context of what is an incident in case management, for example. And then we also talk about topics. Topics are in the bot space. So what topics am I going to build this around? Am I going to build it around HR as a business? Am I going to build it around finance as a business? Within the public service, how am I going to build it and make it relevant to the business of my organisation? So Department of Environment, and we've got the Murray-Darling Basin. What kind of real world aspect do we have to this in terms of making sure that the Murray-Darling Basin is sustainable? So then we've got topics like sustainability. And the next part is about sentiments. So it's about trying to draw judgments and conclusions. Is this person happy? Is this person sad? Is this person, are they in between? So let's talk about generative AI and how it's different from traditional AI. The important part with this is that generative AI is about making predictions based on breaking the input into small parts. And we talk about the idea of tokens. Tokens is about predicting the next best thing based on the previous action. And this is where we get into the idea that generative AI, very, very powerful, but it may be wrong. So it's important as an end user to know that it's a prediction, it's based on breaking the input and the prompt into small pieces and coming up with the next best part, but it may be wrong. And so we're always trying to train it, trying to give it inputs to make it more and more accurate. And that's a big part of moving from a previous version to the new version. How do I train it? How do I make sure that I'm breaking this up and make it more accurate. I'm not going to dwell on this because I know that Imran's going to speak to you more about use cases. So I won't steal his thunder. What's really important about all of this is about responsible use of AI. Now, as I said before, potentially a dry topic in other courses, but it's vital in AI. Because if we get it wrong, then we're going to have bigger implications for it. And you've all seen, I imagine you've all seen with ChatGPT, people trying to subvert it. Let's try and make ChatGPT tell me about how to make a bomb. How do I make it make homophobic statements? How do I make it make sexual statements? And as developers, as ICT professionals, it's our responsibility to avoid this. It's absolutely vital when it comes to that AI space. And what you see on the right-hand side is that it's not just about, a framework that's divorced from the technical side. So on the right-hand side, I started to create a bit of a bot for this demo. And part of it is to make sure that I was getting the check boxes, that I was implementing responsible AI. Now I'm going to draw this into the public service context as well. From the public service context, we need to make sure that we are protecting people's privacy. For example, if you are in the Department of Health or you're working for one of the state agencies where we're building health registers, for example, and we're building a register where we're collecting information from various agencies, from various consumer sides of things, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're not releasing that privacy of data. And you've seen it in the news about how different organisations have inadvertently released private information out there. So it's really important that we put security around everything that we're doing. Lots of people are going to enter information into a bot. And if that goes, then we're in trouble. I'm not going to go through all the different elements of this. There's a lot of content out there that you can access. We'll refer you to that at the end. Part of it is making sure that we secure AI. Really, really important. So there's a couple of different ways that you can subvert AI. You can poison the data. So if you give it the wrong training data, then you're going to have the wrong model and the wrong output. We saw that earlier. There's the other part where we have leakage of data. We've got a person out there who's trying to get in the middle, trying to subvert that, trying to get that private information going everywhere else. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these because I've got to get on to the part for the background for the model here. Just going to check the time.
And 2
minutes. Okay. So another really important part around this is, how do I use it for personal productivity? And this is where we get into the idea of making sure that we're using the right inputs to get the right outputs. For example, with ChatGPT, you can get it to act in a particular way. So imagine that you've seen some of this out there. Lots of people are popping up with ideas about how to interact with it. This is that area where we've got lots of new experts popping up out of the woodwork who suddenly know what they're doing around this idea, selling it as if they've been doing it for years and years. Remember, you're in the driver's seat. Don't rely on AI to do the work for you. To get productivity out of it, you have to be the one who's controlling it. You have to be the one who's correcting it. So, an example, I've used this to help me create documents. Well, at Accenture, we've got very specific policies around the use of it, because once you put it out there, you can't get it back necessarily. But it can give you wrong information. So you have to be correcting it if you want to draw that conclusion, want to use it for productivity. And this is where we get onto the idea of your responsibility as an end user to not put out confidential information out there. So again, public service context, a lot of you have to have a police clearance, baseline clearance, higher than that or whatever. You put that information out there into ChatGPT, suddenly you've exposed, data that's really important, private, has national security implications, or has security implications in terms of just government policy that's not releasable at the moment. That data goes straight out into there and can be used by everyone, and you've got data leakage. There's a better way of doing this, which is making your data, not releasing it out into the general field where we're using it as training data, but we're capturing it, using it within our organisation, separate from the training and the context of building those services that we can then leverage off the shelf. The important part to take away from this slide is we've got a continuum on the right-hand side. The idea of fusion development, which is how do we bring developers who have a little bit of information, a little bit of knowledge, and work together with more of the professional developers. So this is Power users, business Power users. I'm sure you've all seen those applications created in Excel, because we've got end users there. So the bane of our existence as ICT people, where we've got the most important spreadsheet application there that's become a behemoth and critical to the business, and they want to convert it into an enterprise application. Well, the idea of having this fusion development is where you can provide organisational information, but it's structured in such a way that we're not going to have these siloed applications. Now, in terms of the context for this, we've got our Power Platform. We've got underlying within that the Dataverse. The Dataverse is a model that's got pre-made entities that can be drawn on, and it's got pre-existing skills as well. For example, Power Virtual Agents. And we'll see that a little bit later. But down here in the Azure side, we've got services that as professional developers, you can draw on and use. For example, cognitive services, bot frameworks that gives you off-the-shelf components. And they're built on in terms of something like the virtual agents up in the Power Platform. So that's the same service, but it's made to be able to be accessed by Power users. And down the bottom there, we've got generative AI as well. So that's production, using the ChatGPT style, but within your organization. So what are you going to see today? This is a hypothetical situation where the organization wants to take a bot and it wants to make it accessible to their general users to answer questions. Lots of organizations have vast amount of information out there. So this is a practical example of a common use case that we see in organizations where they want to turn that vast amount of information into something accessible.
And like a real organization, we only have 15 minutes to do it. So they need it today.
It's very, very common. So I joined Accenture about 2 years ago. As I was getting on board a global organisation, one of my fellow colleagues who was joining said, "How do I access a particular policy?" And the HR expert in the room said, "I don't know. Ask Ava." So Ava's our HR bot. It's very much focused on a particular topic. It's very much focused on HR. It can tell you what's your policy, what's your leave policy, how much leave do I have in the bank, anything. Have I been chargeable enough at the moment? What's my level within the organisation? What's the level of someone else? Where do I find that information? It just collects it all together. So really practical example that we're going to show you, accessible to your organisation through virtual agent. Most government agencies have access to Power Virtual Agent by way of having a subscription Office 365, or maybe having the Power Platform already within the organisation. So we wanted to get beyond the hype and put into a practical example when most of you would have these tools, potentially have these tools within your organisation to be able to use it. Power Virtual Agent's built directly on top of the Azure frameworks, the bot frameworks, the professional developer frameworks, and I talked about that Fusion development side before. We've got 3 minutes to introduce it. Get it ready for Jim. When we're talking about building something like a bot, it's the same thing in any particular application out there. That agile approach, that software development lifecycle, the idea of going out and creating requirements, it's a little bit different when it comes to bots and things. Definitely. There's the idea of being able to have training data. So picking your training data, understanding your topics. So as a business analyst, for example, traditionally go out there and collect requirements. That's still relevant. But then you need to think, I could create a personality here. And am I going to make a bot that's happy? Am I going to make a bot that's very formal? Am I going to go somewhere in between? Because if you don't create a personality for the bot, it'll happen for you by default. So what's Jim going to show you? We looked at the Victoria ACS. Both Jim and I volunteer for the ACS, as it happens.
Pure coincidence.
Yep. So we thought, right, what would we be able to show you in terms of topics out there that's relevant to the public for SES? So we picked the Victoria SES. So this is a bit of an architecture overview about what Jim's going to show you around Power Virtual Agents. We talked about some of the aspects before. Remember, I drew your attention to the entities. So we need to create entities to be able to make them relevant to the topic. For example, creating an incident. What is an incident? What is an employee? Some of those things are created by default, already sitting there ready to be used. So that's the idea of having an off-the-shelf product that you don't have to build everything from scratch. Some are already sitting there, those system entities. But then there are others where we have to build it specifically to our environment. And I'm going to hand over to Jim now.
Cool. Thank you, Anthony. So let's jump out of the slide deck for a second and dive into PVA. So Power Virtual Agents. So in this particular environment, I've got a couple of test bots here just in case everything has a complete disaster and we need to go to something pre-built, but we're going to build the bot from scratch. Nothing pre-built. So it could be an exciting demo if it doesn't go to plan, which is a fun way to roll, really. So I've logged into Power Virtual Agents. I'm going to create a brand new chatbot. And the bot name is, we'll give it a cool name of ACS Helper. And from this screen, we have an option to boost the conversations with generative answers. So I'm just going to point it at the ses.vic.gov.au website. It's a website that has a whole lot of information, and it's organized in a way that really supports querying. So you can also add, your own public websites. You can add your internal SharePoint sites. You can add a whole lot of different sources that this bot is going to be able to use in order to answer whatever questions get thrown at it. And I'll just click create. Usually takes about 30 seconds to set up the bot. So while we're waiting, let's just have a look at the SES website to kind of get some ideas of what we can ask it. So there's information about, how to plan for floods, storms, earthquakes. If you want to volunteer, if you want to, how do you report an incident? Because you had a tree fall on your car, what do you do? So simple answer, ring 132 500, and that's a good way of getting the information to the SES. However, maybe it would be more efficient, especially in a big disaster where you've got 2,000 people all having, storm damage at once. Instead of having to ring up and call people, maybe we could get the bot to get all that information for you. And now that my bot has finished being created, we go into the test mode. So by adding in the SES website information, that is basically, if the bot doesn't know what you're talking about, it will look to that website to see if it can find out what you're after. So it's kind of a catch-all option. So over here, we do have topics. There's a few default topics that have been added in by default. So goodbye, greeting, start over, thank you. If you need to hand off the conversation from the bot to a real person, there's options in here as well to escalate. We won't worry about that one today. So we've got, hello, I'm an SES helper. How can I help? Let's say, what should I do in the event of an earthquake? See if it works. Let's reply back saying, in the event of an earthquake, it's important to ensure you do the following. Stop as quickly as safety permits and stay in the vehicle. There's a whole lot of other stuff. And there's a couple of links to the SES website. So we've built something that can answer questions. So in other examples, if you had a list of frequently asked questions, now you've immediately exposed that to the bot. If I click on the response, I can see what logic the bot used to come up with this answer. And essentially, it's gone on unknown intent because it couldn't figure out, what am I talking about? Earthquakes. I don't have any topics about earthquakes. So it's an unknown intent. So it's then gone for the generative answers from the website. Let's create a brand new topic. So we'll go up to new topic. And let's go create with Copilot. So a lot of Microsoft tools are getting Copilots these days, allowing you to add natural language to describe what you want to happen. So as a PowerPoint example, you might tell it to, take this document and turn it into a slide deck. And then a minute later, you've got a nice, pretty slide deck. Let's say report an incident is the name of the topic. And the natural language description will say, let a user report a new incident. The required information is the user's name, phone number, address, an incident type, a description, display the responses in an adaptive card. So it's basically saying what we want the bot to request. As we click create, we will get a brand new topic show up, which we can then look over, make sure it's doing what we've asked it to do. We can make additional natural language requests to change it. So the trigger here for this topic is sample phrases. I want to report an incident. I need to report something. Something happened and I need help. So if you say anything like that, it will think that, yep, the intent that you're getting to is create an incident. It then has the what is your name question, which saves it into a variable. What is your phone number? What is your address? What type of incident is this? And instead of just having a string value being returned, I could give it a set list of values that people can choose, so more of a multiple choice. Description, and then that's the end of it. What do we do at the end? So we actually want to do something. It didn't actually display my adaptive card. Is that my adaptive card? Double checking. Yep, that should be right. Yep, there's the code for the adaptive card. So at the end, let's do something with this information, because storing in the bot is not going to do a lot. We want to pass it off to another system. So we'll come down to call an action.
I just want to mention what an adaptive card is.
It's a nice little representation of the data. We'll see it when we get to the demo. That's probably the easiest way. But it lets you validate, what you typed in. And we can create a brand new flow. So this goes into Power Automate flows. And the idea is that we'll take some data, we'll do something with it, and then we'll return something back. So the empty flow, we can add an input. So we'll take the name. We had another, which was the phone number. We'll add another, which is the incident type. Another, which is the description. Should probably have the address as well. And let's do an action. So we'll add a new action to send an email. So you could integrate with any other system you already have. The Power Platform can integrate to a whole lot of different systems, or you can call custom APIs if you need to completely customize it. So it's a really good way to integrate multiple systems together in a very low code way. So I'm just going to search for send email. And there's a task there. And I'm going to send the email to the system administrator mailbox. Say new incident. And in the body of the email, I'll just say new incident, name, phone, address, type, description, incident ID. We don't have an incident ID, so let's generate a random number just to simulate a new. So we're creating a initialize variable step, and we'll call it incident ID. And it's going to be an integer, and the initial value is going to be random number between 10,000 and 100,000. And then finally, the output from this flow is to send the incident ID back to the bot. The value for that will be the incident ID variable. That should be it. It usually takes about 15 seconds to save. Yep, it's ready to go. We recommend you test it. Let's not test it. We'll test it once we get back to the bot. So now if we call an action, it will load the flows. And here's one I created a few seconds ago. So we'll choose that one. And then it gives us all the inputs that the flow expects. So the name is the name that the bot has collected. The phone number is the phone number that the bot collected. The incident type is the incident type. The description is description. The address is the address. And it returns an incident ID number. And so the final thing we'll do is send a message. Your incident number is, and then we'll just paste that incident number or incident ID variable. Done. So we can either test that directly here, or we can publish the bot. Probably a good idea to test it. So I want to report an incident. And the bot comes back and says, what is your name? And we know it's going to ask the name, it's going to ask the phone number, etc. I'm going to preempt it and say, I'm Jim. My phone number is 0408 123 456. So now that it knows that, yep, I've got a name, I've got a phone number, it doesn't need to ask separately for the phone number. If I had given it just ABC as the phone number, it would reject that and say, try again. What's your address? We'll say 6 National Circuit, Barton. So you can enhance this by adding more error checking, call out to other services, make sure that's a valid address. What type of incident is this? We'll say tree. And a description of the incident. A tree fell on my car. So it's now got all the information it needs. It's created an adaptive card showing a nice little incident report. And my incident number is, we didn't get anything back. Did we get an email? That would be the question. 1014, that looks about right. No, something failed in that when I set it up. So I'd need to go back and debug it. It worked fine last night. I probably missed one tiny little step, but that's why we're living dangerously. Here's one I prepared earlier, where it has passed in the information, generated a random ID, and passed it back. So awesome. So almost perfect. I won't try and debug it right now, but I can later. Now that we've got this bot, we can also go and publish it. Let me just save that first. Wait for it to finish saving. And we can choose which channels we want to publish the bot. So you might want to expose it through Teams, you might want to expose it through your website. So we'll publish it. And the benefit there is the same code is going to be running in both locations. So whether you're querying it through the website or querying it through Teams, it's the same bot behind the scenes. So there is a demo website that you get out of the box that you can then share with your colleagues to say, here's my ACS helper bot. And I become an ACS commander. That's not all you have to do. You don't just ask and you become one, but it's a good start to find out, can I become an ACS commander? That sounds cool. And yes, we've got an answer there, and there's some supporting information. So the bot's working there. If we wanted to publish it through Teams, we could go into the channels setting and set up Teams. And all you need to do is just turn on Teams and it's done. It comes in as an app inside Teams. That's done. And then we can open the bot. I will open it with the web browser. And yes, we're sharing Teams through Teams today, just to go a little bit meta. So adding the bot, we could have changed the icon for the bot as well. Once that's added, it sent a message. There it is. So again, we can ask a question. What should I do in a flood? So prepare for a flood. You should bag it, block it, lift it, and leave. Not sure how you bag flood. However, it's a good start. In reality, if this is a common question that you're expecting the bot to have, you'd probably want to create your own topic rather than relying on chance. So by creating those topics, you can really describe exactly what message you want the bot to send back. But this is a good catch-all for anything you haven't thought of. That's working, so that's good. It's got a couple of minutes. I'll just show one more demo, which also uses PBA, but using Azure OpenAI. So the Azure OpenAI Studio is a way of using LLMs inside your own software, inside your bots. You can basically use it, start setting it up here and then use that LLM all over the place. In this case, I've created a basic bot, and this one is running in Australia East, so it's running up in Sydney. And I've given it some information to tell it, how are you going to respond when you respond to questions? So I'm telling it you're an AI information assistant who helps people find information about hotels, and you respond as though you're Shakespeare. When responding, always replace the word here with ear, and always replace Wi-Fi with Internet Lifeblood. We've also added our own data to this bot, and that's using an Azure Cognitive Search Index that we've already set up. And it's gone through, there's a collection of hotel descriptions, and it's created a search index on those descriptions. So when we actually query the bot, we're not sending all those hotel information to the bot. We're querying the cognitive search index, getting the results, and then passing that through to the LLM to generate the text back. And then once it's been passed through, Azure OpenAI will throw out the prompt. If you request it to, it typically keeps it for 30 days just for abuse monitoring, but you can opt out of that if you do want to handle the abuse monitoring yourself, because you don't want to skip that step. And then inside the chat session, noting that I'm pretty much on time. I asked it before, list 3 hotels that have free Wi-Fi, and it's gone off. It's found 3 hotels. And it's also said, these 3 hotels shall keep thee connected with the internet lifeblood during thy stay. So it's responding as it was asked. And I can see the references there as well. So I can click on them and see, yep, there's citations. It says free Wi-Fi. It's matching. And then I said, generate a sentence to get the attention of a waiter. And it responded with, hark, pray catch the attention of the waiter by uttering, good sir, I beseech thee, attend to my humble request. So it's a pretty cool bot. And then to make it even cooler, we can then just click on deploy to a new Power Virtual Agent bot, and we can create it as a Power Virtual Agent bot, or we can take this configuration and put it into an existing Power Virtual Agent bot as well. So you can really start adding extra sources as extra topics and really make your bot fun. I think fun. Shakespeare is, there's not enough Shakespeare around. And you can export this setup. I called it forsooth.json, and you can then import it if you want to reload it later. That's the end of the demo. I have lots of other demos I could do, but we are on time. And questions? Yes.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm not sure Shakespearean English will go so well on government sites, but hey, you never know.
Can we make a request that everyone speaks Shakespearean for the Q&A session?
Thank you, Jim and Anthony. You beseeched thee. I'm curious, what happens to the chat playground? So a bit of 2 questions. Is it powered by ChatGPT-4? Is that what all of this is powered by?
Not quite, but ask the other question first.
And then my other question is, can you ask it what its system message is?
Never actually tried asking it what its system message is, but I would say generally no. You might be able to get it to generate a little bit of text about what it is and what it does, but it typically doesn't tell you everything directly. Behind the scenes, I might actually switch that into JSON view. You can see what is making up the prompt inside this playground. So as the conversation goes on, it's passing through more and more information, based on what it's responded with, based on what you've responded with. And it starts off with the system message. So that is passed through, but whether or not it will tell you exactly that is.
There is another answer, or there's another part to that as well. We have a bot for that called Security Copilot, which the system messages get passed to, and then a security staff could go and query that.
And the first part of the question, it's not ChatGPT. So Azure OpenAI provides models. And in this particular case, the models I have access to, because there's a whole lot of different models, it depends which region of Azure you're using and what models are available in each region. So in this case, I've got access to GPT 3.5 Turbo and 3.5 Turbo 16K, which is 16,000 tokens allowed per session. There is a GPT-4 available. There's the ChatGPT version is available as well. And there's other ones as well. The full list, pretty sure there's Llama ones in there as well. There's DALL-E.
But we talked about beyond the hype as well, right? A lot of that's traditional AI, not the new stuff. It's entities, topics, those kind of things.
Thank you.
Great. Is there one last question, and then it's break time.
Cool. G'day. My question is, as we see this sort of gold rush towards AI and machine learning models, do you see in the future basically all major business decisions being informed through AI? Because as sort of this data age, do you see, like even in our context within agencies, that or before you make any major business decisions, you know, sort of run it through an AI model, some human interaction at some point? Is that sort of where this is all heading towards?
No. I think we've still got SMEs, we've still got domains. Doesn't matter whether we're getting to the point where we're getting generative AI, where your data is your data. It's, you know, you're in the driver's seat. We put that on the slides before. You don't need humans to make, well, you don't need bots to make every decision. You shouldn't have bots make every decision.
I think many decisions will be supported by the AI. So one of the main benefits is if you've got a large amount of data, you know, no one can keep all that in their heads. And this does provide a way to easily unlock very large amounts of data in a way that you don't have to know how you're going to query it ahead of time. It figures it out as it goes. So at the end of the day, the human is still making the final decision. I guess we could get to a point where, you know, 100% of decisions have been made by the AI, and yep, we're happy to then trust it for everything. But we're going to need a fair bit of positive, you know, very high quality responses before we get to that point. So yeah, I think you'll naturally just have it in as part of your workflow day to day. And yeah, it's just going to get more and more embedded in the tools you use. And yeah, you'll start to rely on it. So I don't think any decision, I think there'll be an LLM somewhere in most decisions, maybe 10 years time. But yeah, you can still write an email without an LLM.
Cheers.
If you choose.
I think it comes back to you still working with the AI, not for the AI, which is really important. Okay, thank you so much. So everyone, if you could join me in thanking Jim and Anthony. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll have start on with our second half of the morning. So, you know, please feel free if you're in the room here to keep munching away. It's not lots of nice little croissants and biscuits up the back, which is great. Okay, so our second speaker today is Imran Hussain, who has over a decade worth of experience in driving growth and creating impact through cutting-edge technology and innovation solutions. As an AI enthusiast, Imran is dedicated to assisting businesses in harnessing the power of AI to secure a competitive edge. His hands-on technical background has equipped him with invaluable experience in advising clients from diverse industries and varying scales. In his leisure time, Imran cherishes moments with his loved ones. He is a proud alumni of UNSW, where he earned degrees in software engineering and management. So over to you, Imran.
Thanks, Vicky. All right, we'll get started. It's always hard going second, especially after that amazing demo, but we'll try to make it interesting. We also have some theories to go through here because this is the morning aspect where we talk about use cases, etc. But let's see how we go. So I'll talk about impact of AI, and maybe we can make that a bit interactive, and I'd like to hear your experiences. Also, you know, what use cases you are seeing in your organizations, your departments, and what we are seeing out in the market, right? And then we'll talk about some core principles to keep in mind when we are building AI solutions. And in the end, there will be a demo, which is very similar to what Jim has shown, but using a different set of technologies, showcasing, how versatile the technology has become and how easy it is to build chatbots. All right. Okay, so let's get started. Well, I mean, when we talk about AI adoption, it's the change of the rate of change is amazing. It has doubled in only 5 years, and it's a remarkable upward trajectory. And it shows a significant surge in acceptance and integration across various industries and sectors. Only, if we think back when we were young or our parents, there was a lot of trust issues with AI. But what we're seeing now is, we have gone through that hurdle. It's generally accepted that AI will be used somewhere in your organization. And all of this is, if you look at that number, that was 2022. And ChatGPT came at the end of 2022, right? So all of this is pre-ChatGPT. This is a report from McKinsey survey, which came out earlier this month. And they did a survey mid-April. So that's only, 5 months after ChatGPT came into surface, right? And by that time, what they have found that it's early days, like any other technology, but there's already widespread use of Gen AI. So it's impossible to understate the impact and the transformative nature of this technology, right? So this is an interesting chart that shows media mentions. This is from Google Trends. So you can go to trends.google.com and do a search and then see how that's trending over time, right? And you can see back in 2010, 2015, big data had a certain, there was a lot of mention in the media of big data. We are seeing that similar trend with generative AI and ChatGPT now, so from late 2022 to now, but it's a lot more dynamic. It's going up and down, and that shows the rapid pace of changes in this area, right? Every now and then you're hearing, from 1 billion parameter, now we're hitting trillion, right? So it's just the number of changes. The Facebook the other day, Meta released Llama, right? So now people are experimenting with that and coming up with, human-like decision-making capability when it comes to coming up with accuracy. So there's always change happening in that space, and that's obviously capturing attention of the media. All right, so I wanted to take a few minutes because when we think of Gen AI, it's often we often think of Gen AI. We forget that AI is a much broader lens, and organizations have been using that for such a long time. And Jim and Tony showed, how you make an AI chatbot, where generative AI is just a component, right? You're still making a decision in terms of which topic to choose. So you would have an AI model there that understands your intent and maps that to a certain topic, right? So it's been used for a very long time. But I wanted to take maybe 5 minutes to quickly go through and then maybe get a sense of, okay, where do you see it being used in your organization today? Things to think about is, okay, well, do you have a recommendation engine somewhere? Are decisions being made somewhere? Like, are you monitoring something? So these are the area. Yeah. Any hands in the room? And if you're online, feel free to post a comment. Okay. Yeah. There you go. So auto completion. But is that in workplace? So you are coding and insert an ID. That's right. That's a really good example of AI. Yeah. Any other Any other uses in your workplace right now? Sometimes it's hard to think about that because you don't really think AI is being used. But you know, is there a place where, you know, text to speech or speech to text happening, right? Call center, yeah. So AI is very easily being used there, yeah. That's right, yeah. And not just the generative side of that, right? So when you send out those emails, you're making decisions who to send, what email, and what information to put in that. So you would have, invariably, you would have models behind it that's making all of these decisions, right? Any other quick ideas? Think of, you know, is decision being made anywhere? You know, are you getting recommendations, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And do you use AI somewhere over there?
Yeah, so we have an automated.
And the unit tests are auto-generated. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Even more mundane areas like, you know, if you're in IT ops, you would find that, you know, anomalies are being, you know, you would have models that detects anomalies and send out reports or, you know, generates alerts, right? So those are all AI. So it's so integrated with everything that we do at workplace and in our life that often we don't appreciate where AI is being used, right? Any more hands from the room or online? Let's just move on to. Okay. Yeah, so these are some use cases that we see in the industry. Not all of this is generative AI. You might see some like code generation. You know, that's a very solid generative AI use case. But a lot of this is, you know, just the traditional AI being used everywhere in the industry, right? You know, for example, content creation. Okay, so we see subtitles. You know, when we watch YouTube videos, subtitles get generated, right? And that's automated. That's automated. So you have an AI model that goes and generates that from the spoken words. What else is there? HR automation. You know, most of us have gone through that when we started working, and most of you have started working recently in this industry. You know, invariably there was a AI-powered screening process, right? When, you know, tens of thousands of applications go in there, there would be, you know, some screening process that has a AI model behind it, right? What else is there? I've spoken about AI ops, so you know, in IT operations, that there would be AI, and you know, we came up with some numbers that we have seen in the industry, particularly around, you know, chatbot. A lot of those conversations, so the traditional live person chatbot, from there to an automated chatbot, you can have really good accuracy these days with, even before generative AI came into place, you could have really good accuracy around intent understanding, right? And then, you know, automate most of the answers. What else is there? Oh, need to. Yeah, I do have some meetings today. Jim was saying my calendar is free today. Yeah, environmental intelligence. I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, weather prediction, right? Weather forecast. We all are familiar with that. But do we think about how that can potentially be used in industry, right? So that there you go. That's another really good use case of AI. Okay, so when it comes to you know, out of all of those use cases, when it comes to some high impact ones, these are the three areas where we see where we're seeing, you know, we would call them low hanging fruits. Okay, talent, customer care, and app modernization, and each of those use cases has a generative AI component to it. So let me spend some time on it, and then I'll talk about where we see government use cases, in these specific areas. So I mentioned HR. That's an obvious space. You could potentially get 40% improvement in HR productivity, and some of the areas are around employee data management, employee communications. So just like Accenture, our HR is mostly chatbot these days. And I was trying it out when Anthony spoke about that, and I didn't know my leave balance, so I just went to Slack and asked, what's my current leave balance? And you can see all of that, all of the data. The bot just came back with it. Yeah, so it's a massive productivity boost. If you think about, in the past, you would have had to write an email or go log into a system, find out that information, or talk to someone, right? Okay, and in terms of generative AI task, it would be mainly content generation and classification in that space, right? Generative AI would have made it a lot easier and a lot better to identify your entities, okay, and identify, classify content than it was in the past, right? So that's where we see a lot of value. The other area is customer care. So that's an obvious space, and ChatGPT became popular by being a chat GPT, right? It was a bot. In that space, we'll see, transformative change. Just to talk about one aspect of it, I've been in the enterprise search space for the last better part of last 10 years. After generative AI came into fore, the entire architecture of how chat is implemented is now being rethought of. People are re-engineering it. In the past, it was, you would always have an index, right? If you're familiar with Elastic, Lucene, a search engine would have an index. It would go and crawl your content and build an index, and then you do a search. But now with these very good models, which has a very good semantic understanding of the content, we right now are talking to organizations who want to reimagine their search. And that's happening. This is not even 1 year. So we haven't had an anniversary of ChatGPT as yet. So you can see the transformative impact of this technology in the industry. The other area is around app modernization, and we have spoken about unit test being generated. The other space where we're seeing some traction is code translation. Yeah, a lot of our clients, IBM being IBM, are on mainframe, and a lot of those programs have been coded in COBOL, right? But these days it's very hard to find someone with COBOL skills. So you could potentially go through a modernization program where you use these Gen AI models to modernize your programs. So your COBOL tech code could be converted into Python or something else, right? Okay. In terms of relevance in government, I think most of us would find a place where it can be used. So if you think about where you work, each of these pillars would have a space. So customer care, all of our citizen services, there is a massive element of customer care there. The Service Australia has a massive call center, right? It's all about productivity and how do you make it easier for people on the ground, also your customers, right? Contextual awareness. So if I go and start chatting on, in my MyGov app, does the app know, have my contextual awareness, like I showed with our HR bot, right? It knew who was logged in, my leave balances, and it found the details, right? So there is a massive opportunity in that space of bringing that awareness. Google is very good at that, right? Like, it as soon as you start searching, will it will provide you with suggestions on what you should be searching based on your, pattern of searches, right? So can we leverage that to provide a better experience to our customers, right? So that's an interesting lens to look at this. I've spoken about app modernization. Okay, so these are some specific examples around the civilian, more citizen services, government departments. And I've also got some study linked down the bottom. Like if you do get the deck, you can click through that and have a look at that. We see, for example, the first study actually came from Accenture, a new era of generative AI for everyone, that found that 39% of public sector working hours will benefit from human AI collaboration and automation, right? So you can see these numbers, these are massive numbers, right? And there is a huge potential of leveraging AI and making it easier for both the employees and our citizens. Some examples for the national security side of things, so defense, home affairs, etc. In defense, there is I'm not sure whether you have been privy to that, but there is a lot of focus and a lot of work around simulated mission planning. That's where these technologies can have a potentially transformative impact, right? You could generate a lot of these things, right, rather than starting from scratch. Okay. A lot of us have gone through security vetting. That process could be improved a lot by augmenting AI to it. If you think about the time lag you have gone through and the amount of paperwork you had to do for that, just thinking through those steps and processes, you can immediately think about where AI can potentially add value, right? We've spoken about code generation. All right, so I wanted to spend a few minutes on some of the principles we think is important to keep in mind when you start building your AI solutions. So I take some of you are in that space where you're building applications. You are a builder. In other places you're a consumer, or even like you're close to decision makers. So it's from our point of view, the four key principles to keep in mind. One would be open. So that gives you flexibility in terms of best tooling out in the market. If it's OpenAI, how do I use that? If it's Llama, how do I use that? If it's Flan, maybe for my particular Gen AI use case, I need a smaller model. How do I use that? So having that frame of mind where I can leverage open technologies in a secure way, right? The other aspect we feel is important is targeted. While there is a huge potential in having a general purpose AI model and technology in terms of addressing different issues, it's the scale where you might hit, like you might struggle with, right? So can we have and these are the options to explore. In some places that might be the solution. In other places where you're doing some kind of content generation, let's say like for your simulated training module, is it better? Can you train a smaller model to do that really efficiently rather than using a big model, right? Is Llama a good model, or can we use Flan YAL2, right? So these are the decisions. I think it's like we feel it's important, right? So start with the use case and make your have a targeted approach to this. Trusted is definitely, trust is very important, and then we see that that being drilled into our training. especially particularly the space we're working in, right? Because we have that huge trust of public on us, and we have to honor that trust, right? And then making sure that it's baked into every single step of our life cycle. Anthony has gone through, like, you know, each of these solution that you build would have, you would have multiple steps to it, right? So making sure that trust is baked into each of these. And when it comes to trust, do you have governance in place? So if you're deploying models, are you governing and monitoring those models for drifts? Yeah, is the model inferring the way it was originally? Is there bias being introduced to this? Right. So making sure that those things are in place. Transparency. Do you know what data it was trained on? Right. Do you have a confidence? To what it would return. Right. So that having that perspective. Also regulatory compliance. Right. The last principle is around empowerment. Right. Where we as a public servant and an organization having a overall sight on what's going on, okay, and having the right tools. So we have seen the Azure Playground, and we've got similar tooling in IBM. We'll talk about WatsonX.ai. Do you have a platform where you can you're not just working with an endpoint? You kind of have an ownership of what's going on, what data you're working with, what models you're working with, and you have a visibility and sight on how that model is working. Right. The other important aspect is, I think, around deployment. Right? Is there flexibility in terms of where it should be deployed? And that's a big topic in Canberra, you would see. Like, because we work with protected workload, we work with secret workload, the environment has to be certified for a certain type of workload, so when you build a solution, keeping in mind, can we host it on-prem, or is there a requirement to host it on-prem? If not, what are my cloud options, right? Where is the data going? So having all of those perspectives in mind. Okay, so this is IBM's platform approach to AI. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just a quick dump. The approach we have taken to our solutions is we build all of that on top of a Kubernetes orchestration platform called Red Hat OpenShift. So some of you might be familiar with this, and then wherever you can deploy OpenShift, like Azure, AWS, Google, or even on-prem, we can deploy our products, right? Tied to that empowerment. But other times you might want to work with as a service, product, and those kind of decisions are very important, particularly when we're working with such large models, because you can't just deploy models in your backyard. Right, it needs a lot of machine power just to keep running. So having those perspectives. WatsonX is our AI platform. We have got a WatsonX.ai is where you go and build your AI solutions. It's got a prototyping and playground area. You can pick different models. Llama, Flan, so a lot of open source models, and IBM is releasing some models as well that are focused on different industry spaces. So you can play with those models, but we're also embedding that in our products, similar to what you've seen with Azure, how Copilot is being embedded into the product, right? So for example, I'll show you our assistant today. So that would have a lot of the generative AI components being embedded into it. Code Assistant is there to do the code translation, and we also have WatsonX Orchestrate. All right, I wanted to move on to the demo now. But before I do that, are there any questions? Anyone want to talk about any of the stuff that I've just covered? Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned chatbots being used instead of HR, right? Like the first thing that you do when you call up, IT is usually get on that. We also have statistics on. You said that it was 95% accuracy, didn't you? In one of the
You can achieve accuracy in terms of your intent understanding. Knowing what what people want.
Is that statistic from people actually hanging up, like saying thank you to the AI or something, hanging up?
So there are multiple ways of tracking that. One would be, how many of my intents are being answered versus how many of them are going to don't know. Yeah, going to the default fallback. Also, you can have thumbs up or down, getting feedback from people. You can see what percentage of conversation is going to a conclusion. You can see what percentage of that are you have to actually hand over to a human agent. So there are lots of trackings for this particular study. I don't know that, but there are papers that goes through that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. So let me get onto this. So in terms of the demo fill, it would be very similar to what Jim has shown, but I'm not going to go down into details of building an actual chatbot. I will just show you, how quickly you can build a working chatbot by just pointing your chatbot to a website. So it's the first component of what Jim had shown. So for this, I'm going to use AUSTRAC website, so austrac.gov.au, and we'll use Watson Discovery. Watson Discovery is our enterprise search solution as the knowledge base. So I've already done that. So Watson Discovery, I've pointed that to AUSTRAC website. It has gone there and crawled it and built a collection. Okay, so now I've got my knowledge base. Then I'm using another IBM Cloud service, NeuralSeek, to kind of like sit between LLM and my knowledge base, and doing a lot of those governance and checks, making sure that I'm getting relevant answers. And on the other end, I've got Watson Assistant as the chatbot tool, orchestration tool. Okay, so just three components: Discovery, NeuralSeek, and Watson Assistant. All of these are available from IBM Cloud. So if you just go there, register it, you'll be able to find these three: Watson Discovery, NeuralSeek, Assistant, and try it out yourself. It's so easy to get up and running with a moderately performant chatbot. It's amazing, and this technology has kind of skyrocketed over the last 7-8 months. Right? So I'll show you how you could potentially do that, and our end goal is to build a chatbot like this. Okay. All right. So let's use the 10 minutes we have to do that. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is IBM Cloud, and as I've shown, I have just give me a sec. Yep. I have just simply pointed to AUSTRAC website, and Watson Discovery has just gone and crawled it. Okay, so it's just a traditional search engine, similar to Google. If you search something about AUSTRAC, it will come back with a page on AUSTRAC, right? Now I'll go to IBM Cloud. So that's the second component. All right. So let's set up our NeuralSeek and Watson Assistant. Okay. So resource. Yep. So I'll just create a free one. And you can, like if you have your own LLM, you can point NeuralSeek to your own LLM. If you have OpenAI subscription, you can just point it to that one, right? So this sits in between your LLM and the knowledge base, right? So let's launch NeuralSeek. All right. I'm very creative as well, so I'll just call that Austrac bot. Okay, so now it wants me to point this to a knowledge base, right? And out of the box, NeuralSeek supports these ones. So if you have an Elastic search engine or Kendra, you know, in this particular case, I'm using Discovery. Let me copy my details of the collection. All right, so I'm just pointing to my Discovery collection. Okay, so it's not incredibly fast, but it's there. Okay. And you can also use different types of virtual assistants. In this particular case, we'll be using Watson Assistant, but you could use AWS Lex, Cognigy, Core AI, or even Azure. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is this that could be a different one to the Power one, but yeah, my Azure knowledge isn't that strong. I'm going to enable embedding links. Let's go next. Next. All right. So now I want to integrate with Watson Assistant, right? So I'll download a custom extension file, and let's go spin up Watson Assistant. Okay. I'm going to go for a free one as well. So they'll you can go and start playing with this right now, but they have limit. The free versions have limit in terms of the usage volume, right? But you know, just to try it out and build something really quick, it's very easy. Okay, so I've launched Watson Assistant. Ooh, logged out. It looks like my okay. Austrac Assistant. So these are some of the different channels you can publish this assistant to. I'm just going to go with a web option, but there's SMS, Slack, Facebook, WhatsApp. You know, these are out-of-the-box integration. You can also build your custom integration, right? I'm not going to bother filling up all of this, so I'll just go to my configuration. So what I'll do, I'll set up an integration to NeuralSeek, which is a service in IBM Cloud and sits in between LLM and the chatbot. Okay, so let's call this my NeuralSeek and use the integration file. So if you have an OpenAPI specification, you can integrate anything, right? I mean, this could be my OpenAI endpoint as well, ChatGPT endpoint. So I could integrate that with Watson Assistant if I wanted to. You just need a open API specification. Okay. And my authentication to this particular instance. Okay. All right, so let's go to the actual setting up of the chatbot. The way we organize things, we call them actions. So this is similar to what Jim had described as topics. You know, you identify your action, you know, what do you want to do, and then it will go, you kind of like, you know, define the steps. You could even use generative AI to generate all of those steps by describing what you want to do. In this particular case, I'm not going to do all of that because you have sat through and seen that. What I will do, I will just work with the fallback. So I'm not going to have any action apart from just sending all questions to Neural Seek, so it can generate answer from large language model. Okay, so there is a Neural Seek starter kit. So those were some of the other templates that you could start with, right? So if I go new actions, start with template, there are lots of different templates you can start with. Okay, so let's go configure it now. I wanted to use the extension that I have configured, my Neural Seek with a typo. And I want to seek an answer from Neural Seek, okay, by passing in my question. Okay. So that's all saved. I also want to call this action when there is no action matches, right? Because I want that to be the default answer. So right now, if I go to preview and ask something about what is OSTrack, it will just say, I don't know, right? Because I haven't really defined anything to understand that question. So it just goes to no action matches and says, I'm afraid I don't understand. So what I'm going to do is I'll go in there, you know, in above this step, I'll add a new step that will just use the Neural Seek action, and I'll end this action after that, right? I could have chosen not to end it, right? And then just capture all the LLM answers and publish them later. So if you have a scenario where you don't want the LLM generated answers to be published straight away, you could just let it continue, say, I'm afraid I don't understand, and then come back later and publish them, right? Yeah, so it can work as an accelerator in terms of your content curation and generating answers, right? Okay, so if I save it now and ask the same thing, what is OSTrack? You know, it should go to, yep, so it is going to Neural Seek, okay, and I'm using light version, so it's not the most performant. Yeah, so you can see that, you know, it has generated an answer. Now, I've been in industry for some time. I can tell you, if you know, before last year, end of last year, this was unthinkable. What chatbots were good at was understanding intent, understanding what you want to know, but then it would map it to pre-canned answers. Now, with these models, you know, GPT-4, GPT 3.5, Llama, and other models that Watson X is making available, you can get a really good answer generated from your contents. In this particular case, it's just coming out of the Watson Discovery collection that I've built, right? It could be some other content. It could be my on-prem. You could have Discovery sitting on-prem, crawling through your SharePoint articles, right? Okay, let's make it a bit more interesting and publish it, right? So I want to go to preview, change the background to OSTrack background. I had taken a screenshot yesterday. And change the look and feel a bit, make it a bit more darker color so it looks like Austrac. We'll call it Austrac Assistant. Yeah. I don't want those example questions, so let me remove them. All right. So now this is ready for usage. So if you wanted to try it out, feel free to scan that. All right, with your phone, you can go and try it out. Yeah, you're more than welcome to go and try out different questions. In fact, I would love for you to try it out and we can see it in action. If you, there's no virus, it's just that, it's just this page. You have seen how I generated the QR code. And while we're doing this, we can have some Q&A. So we are towards the end. Any question from the room or from online?
I've got my running shoes on.
I'm happy for you to ask anything about Austrac website. So if you're familiar with...
Can I ask something more general?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, this is very general.
Yeah.
We're looking here at how AI can be used as a supporting tool in human enterprise. I wonder, and again, it's a very general question, what elements of human enterprise, what would AI, do you anticipate AI would most have trouble emulating moving forward? Creativity, insight, that sort of thing. Are there any specific human elements that you think AI will most struggle with as it progresses and develops?
Yeah, I would say up until end of last year, creativity and fluency was that space. Now we have seen these large language models doing incredibly well, even in that space, right? So it's about finding, the end of the day, these are just models, right, that are doing what we're teaching it to do, right? So we got to find where that model add value. It won't replace us. There will be just readjustment to how we work. If we think back 10 years ago, a lot of the work that are automated now, people were doing that. Those were probably boring jobs that you didn't like, right? So I think with the rate of progress we're seeing, there would be a lot of elements where AI would be incredibly good at emulating us. But as Anthony mentioned, we are the pilot here, right? So we just got to make sure we use it responsibly.
Thank you for the talk today. An idea crossed my mind, which is my own personal experience with chatbots trying to assist me. This is purely my experience and not reflective of anyone else's. And in my experience, I cannot recall once where a chatbot has actually been helpful in achieving what I wanted to achieve. It's usually just me trying to see what they can offer, realizing that anything that they can offer is just information that I can get myself. But usually the reason why I call is to actually solve a problem. Like with my ISP, it's usually like a bill that's wrong or something that only a human can do. One of the fears that came to mind when you were discussing this idea of like putting these bots between you as the user and in this scenario, like if I want to call my ISP because my bill is wrong, I want a change that a chatbot, I don't believe the organization, in this case the ISP, whether that be Optus, Telstra, would ever give that bot the ability to, say, manipulate their financial records or something like that. As a result, are you potentially just putting a barrier between the user trying to get help, where the help is an action that the chatbot usually will never be trusted with? Because, of course, security-wise, you don't want a front-facing bot that's just kind of got almost a mind of its own, but not so much to be able to manipulate your company's finances or heck, change IP addresses or whatever.
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, that's where it comes down to, how we implement it, right? So I would argue if you build a useful bot, then it would understand when you want to talk to people and would connect you to people. Yeah. So if it works as a barrier, then that's not a good bot, right? It should make it easier for you to go and talk to people. It's just, those tasks which can be reasonably performed by a bot, you want them to be addressed by a bot, so that there is, less workload on your call center, for example, right? So it's finding that balance, right? And yeah, sure, like if you don't want to chat to a bot, then the phone number should be free for you to go and connect to an agent. Right now, those phone numbers are not free because they're answering all of those mundane questions, right? Yeah, questions that can be easily answered by a bot. So it's finding the balance where they can add value rather than, yeah.
I feel like there's an assumption. Maybe you're right.
Yeah, so I think a good bot would identify early on. So I want to talk to an agent and just transfer you back there. If it's just about finding out, your usage and you're logged in, it should be able to just give you that information rather than you trying to go and, navigate a website and go to the portal. Yeah. Like Anthony can talk to that. There is whole practice around how to build a good bot, right? So, it's. I mean, I've shown a simplistic way of quickly get up and running, but to make it really successful, you have to go through that process. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? There was just one comment on the Teams, Imran, that most bots have the keyword of person if you want to get through to a person faster. Is that right? Does that sound reasonable?
Most bots have the keyword.
Have the keyword of person if you want to get through to a person faster.
Yeah. Like some kind of button or, it's interesting you mentioned Myra Derling Basin because I was building a demo for them. If you just say I want to talk to someone, it should identify that intent and connect you to an agent. I mean, that should be as simple as that, right?
Great. Any other questions?
Thank you. That's a good.
Yeah. If not, then look, join me in thanking Imran for his really interesting presentation. And also to our other speakers, Jim and Anthony, for their presentation earlier on, which is great. Thank you. And you've just now got to listen to me for 2 minutes.
I don't have the clicker on,
That's
so
all right.
if you wanted
I'll
to
just press
go
the
next.
button. Yeah, it's all good. So as a reminder, the ACS here is the Professional Association for the Tech Sector. So we have, I guess, as part of the APSC program that you're on, you're members of the ACS. So you're part of the 47,000 person network that we have across Australia, across all disciplines and across all stages of your career. So we're here to help promote the technology sector in Australia to make sure that we have the right number or the number of workforce that we need. So by 2027, Australia needs to have 1.2 million workers. We're here to champion emerging and critical technologies and making sure that everyone of those workers are skilled to keep Australia competitive and really have the best benefit for Australian community and our society. So we do a lot of things with that for our members in terms of helping them throughout their career, helping them to stay current and competent, but also recognise your capabilities and currency as tech professionals through our different recognition programs as well. So that's part of that thing, and also helping you navigate your career no matter which direction it may go, because what you do today will not be necessarily what you do in a couple of years' time. So Obviously, our recognition program that I mentioned there before is our ACS certification, which is a vendor agnostic certification. So unlike the vendor type of certifications that's specific to a product, this is very much competency based. So it demonstrates that you have the capability and the experience of taking a piece of knowledge and actually applying it in the workforce. So this is a really good validation of currency and competency. It's analogous to the CPA program, the Engineers Chartered program, and this is the one that we have for the technology sector. And this is based on Sophia, which is also used throughout the APS. In terms of what else we do to help you navigate your career and connect you with people, well, obviously we've got events like today, which we do specifically for the APS. The APSC, but we've also do a number of in-house events as part of ACS Canberra, but also virtually. So you don't have to necessarily come here. There's plenty of opportunity to upskilling and learning more broad issues of the tech society, tech sector. But the other thing is really connecting you with professionals. So we've got our mentoring program. I always get caught on that one. We've got our mentoring program, for instance. We've got a number of different just networking events. It's great to be able to just meet people in the different across the whole sector, because you never know who might become your next employee.